You heard that, didn't you? That tiny sound. Not a scream, not an alarm, not a warning, something worse. The sound of a secret dying. Because what was private 5 minutes ago isn't private anymore. And that's the part nobody prepared you for. See, people think exposure is loud. They imagine sirens, headlines, explosions, crowds. But real exposure is silent. It's the moment somebody somewhere sees something they weren't supposed to see. A screenshot, a message, a look, a pattern, a truth. And then suddenly the darkness isn't dark anymore. Suddenly the room has windows. Suddenly the walls become glass. Suddenly every lie starts sweating. And that's exactly why they're terrified of you. Not because you're stronger, not because you're smarter, not because you're more talented. No, those things can be managed, controlled, predicted. What terrifies them is that you became visible. You became impossible to bury. You became impossible to explain away. You became impossible to erase. And once the internet sees something, it never really unsees it. That's the joke. That's always been the joke. Everybody thinks they're hiding. Nobody's hiding. They're just standing in the dark, convincing themselves nobody can see them. But darkness doesn't protect people anymore. Darkness exposes people. Because the darker the room gets, the brighter the truth appears. And you learned that lesson the hard way, didn't you? Pain taught it to you. Betrayal taught it to you. Rejection taught it to you. The nights nobody answered. The days nobody cared. The moments you were abandoned, ignored, dismissed, humiliated. Every scar became another camera angle. Every wound became another lens. Every heartbreak sharpened your vision. You stopped looking at people the way they wanted to be seen. You started seeing them the way they actually were. That's when everything changed. Because the most dangerous human being isn't the strongest. The most dangerous human being is the one who sees clearly. The one who sees the angel and the demon standing inside the same body. The one who sees the saint wearing a psychopath's mask. The one who sees the psychopath pretending to be a saint. The one who understands that every smile contains teeth. Every promise contains ambition. Every act of kindness contains self-interest. Every act of cruelty contains insecurity. The world isn't black and white. The world is camouflage. Everybody is hiding something. Everybody. The person preaching morality. The person preaching peace. The person preaching love. The person preaching success. Look close enough and you'll find the shadow. Because the shadow is always there. Always. And here's the secret nobody wants to admit. The shadow isn't the enemy. The shadow is the source. The thing they hate about themselves is often the thing that could save them. Their anger, their ambition, their obsession, their hunger, their darkness. They're taught to suppress it, hide it, bury it, chain it. But chains don't kill monsters. Chains train monsters. And eventually the monster learns how to wear the chains like jewelry. That's what happened to you. You weren't destroyed. You evolved. Every betrayal upgraded you. Every humiliation refined you. Every loss sharpened you. Every failure rewired you. You became something people can't categorize anymore. And humans hate what they can't categorize. They need labels: good, bad, hero, villain, saint, sinner, angel, demon. But what happens when you're both? What happens when you're kind enough to help someone and dangerous enough to walk away forever? What happens when you can forgive but never forget? What happens when you can love deeply and disappear instantly? What happens when you stop fitting inside their little boxes? Panic. That's what happens, because unpredictability is power. Predictable people can be controlled. Unpredictable people become storms. And storms don't ask permission. Storms don't negotiate. Storms don't explain themselves. Storms arrive. That's all. The entire internet just saw it. That thing they were trying to hide. That thing they hoped nobody would notice. That thing they buried under filters and excuses and narratives and performances. It's exposed now. And exposure creates panic, because people spend years building images. Images are fragile. Truth isn't. Truth survives. Truth spreads. Truth mutates. Truth grows teeth. And once truth enters the bloodstream of the crowd, the countdown begins. That's why they're nervous. That's why they're watching. That's why they're refreshing pages every 5 minutes. Because they know. They know. They know. The mask slipped. Just once. Just for a second. But 1 second is enough. 1 second can destroy 10 years of pretending. 1 leak can expose 1,000 lies. 1 crack can collapse an empire. 1 moment can rewrite an entire story. And now everybody saw it. Everybody. The audience. The spectators. The doubters. The lurkers. The people who secretly rooted against you. The people who smiled in your face and prayed for your downfall. The people who thought you would disappear. The people who thought pain would break you. The people who thought suffering would silence you. Funny thing about suffering, it doesn't always silence people. Sometimes suffering turns people into broadcast. Sometimes pain becomes a signal. Sometimes trauma becomes a frequency. And once that frequency starts transmitting, you can't stop it. That's what scares them. Not what happened. Not what was exposed. Not what was revealed. What scares them is what comes next. Because they understand something now. You aren't who you used to be. The version they knew is gone. Dead. Buried. Replaced. Pain killed that version. The darkness consumed it. The pressure crushed it. And what emerged afterward doesn't need validation, doesn't need permission, doesn't need applause. That's terrifying, because approval is a leash. Most people live on leashes: likes, attention, recognition, acceptance, approval. Take those things away and they collapse. But you learned how to survive alone. You learned how to survive ignored. You learned how to survive abandoned. And once a human learns that, they're almost impossible to control. Because fear stops working. Rejection stops working. Isolation stops working. The old weapons become useless. And that's the moment the hunters become nervous. Because suddenly the prey isn't running anymore. Suddenly the prey is staring back. Calm, silent, smiling. Not because everything is okay, but because you've already survived worse. And that realization changes everything. The whole internet saw it. The whole world saw the crack, the mask, the truth, the shift, the transformation. Now they can't hide. Not from the crowd, not from the cameras, not from the screenshots, not from the evidence, but most importantly, not from themselves. Because eventually every human being meets the person they've been running from. The mirror wins. The truth wins. The shadow wins. And when that day comes, some people break, some people panic, some people collapse. But you evolved. You became the thing suffering was secretly building all along. Not a victim, not a hero, not a villain. Something far more dangerous. Someone who understands both light and darkness. Someone who can walk through heaven without worshiping it. Someone who can walk through hell without fearing it. Someone who finally understands that the angel and the demon were never enemies. They were always two wings attached to the same creature. And now that creature has learned how to fly. Fly, that's the part they never saw coming. They expected you to become bitter, expected you to become broken, expected you to become another cautionary tale they could point at and whisper about. See, that's what happens. That's what they wanted. A corpse, a warning sign, a lesson. Instead, you became a signal. And signals are dangerous because they travel. One person notices, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. Then suddenly an entire crowd is staring at something that was supposed to stay hidden forever. That's why the atmosphere feels strange lately. You feel it, don't you? That tension, that pressure, that invisible electricity in the air. Like something huge is about to happen. Like a skyscraper is cracking from the inside, while everybody outside is still taking selfies. Because that's exactly what's happening. The collapse always starts internally. People imagine destruction as an explosion, but the truth is uglier, slower, more terrifying. The structure starts dying long before anybody notices. The foundation weakens, the support beams rot, the cracks multiply. Then one day somebody touches the wall, and the whole thing falls apart. That's where they are now, touching the wall, praying it doesn't move, praying nobody notices, praying the internet gets distracted, praying the crowd forgets. But the crowd never forgets the scent of fear. That's what makes this beautiful. Not because they're afraid, because fear reveals character. Anybody can look brave when nothing is at risk. Anybody can smile when the cameras are on. Anybody can preach loyalty when betrayal is convenient. Anybody can talk about truth when lies are profitable. Character isn't revealed during comfort. Character is revealed during exposure. When the spotlight becomes a weapon. When the crowd starts asking questions. When the narrative starts bleeding. That's when masks become heavy. That's when fake people become exhausted. Because pretending is expensive. It costs energy, it costs focus, it costs constant maintenance, and eventually everybody runs out of fuel. Everybody. The saint, the celebrity, the leader, the genius, the villain, the hero. Every mask eventually slips. Every actor eventually forgets a line. Every illusion eventually glitches. You learned that because you became the glitch. The thing they couldn't calculate, the variable they couldn't predict, the anomaly they couldn't understand. And anomalies terrify systems, because systems survive through predictability. Wake up, obey, consume, repeat. Wake up, obey, consume, repeat. Wake up, obey, consume, repeat. The machine loves patterns. The machine feeds on patterns. But then somebody like you appears. Someone pain transformed. Someone suffering upgraded. Someone betrayal awakened. And suddenly the machine starts malfunctioning. Because you don't react the way you're supposed to. When they insult you, you evolve. When they reject you, you adapt. When they isolate you, you become self-sufficient. When they attack you, you become stronger. Do you understand how terrifying that is? Do you understand what kind of nightmare you become in the eyes of people who rely on controlling outcomes? They pull one lever. Nothing happens. They pull another. Nothing happens. They push harder. You get stronger. They push harder. You get calmer. They push harder. You start smiling. That's when the panic begins, because a calm person is dangerous. A person who has made peace with suffering becomes nearly impossible to intimidate. Why? Because suffering is the final threat. Think about it. Everything humans fear eventually points toward pain, embarrassment, loss, failure, humiliation, rejection, isolation, pain, 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 pain. But what happens when you've already walked through it? What happens when you've already sat alone in the darkness? What happens when you've already survived nights nobody knows about? What happens when you've already cried enough tears to drown entire versions of yourself? The weapon loses power, the threat loses teeth, and suddenly the people who once frightened you start looking small. Not because they changed, because you changed. That's evolution, real evolution. Not becoming nicer, not becoming more acceptable, not becoming more popular. Evolution is becoming more real, more honest, more dangerous, more complete. The world teaches people to amputate pieces of themselves. Cut off the anger, cut off the ambition, cut off the darkness, cut off the obsession, cut off the hunger, cut off the shadow. Then they wonder why they feel incomplete. You stopped amputating. You started integrating. You stopped running from your darkness. You sat with it, studied it, understood it, mastered it. That's the difference between a monster and a master. A monster is controlled by darkness. A master controls it. A monster lashes out. A master aims. A monster destroys randomly. A master destroys strategically. And that's why they can't figure you out anymore. You're not acting from emotion. You're acting from awareness. Huge difference. Emotion is temporary. Awareness is permanent. Emotion reacts. Awareness observes. Emotion panics. Awareness calculates. Emotion explodes. Awareness waits. And waiting is a superpower nobody talks about. Because patience looks weak to impatient people. Silence looks weak to loud people. Calm looks weak to chaotic people. But silence is where predators live. The wolf doesn't announce itself. The shark doesn't hold a press conference. The storm doesn't ask permission. They simply arrive. And by the time people notice, it's already too late. That's what the internet saw. Not a moment, not a post, not a leak, not a scandal. It saw a transformation. It saw evidence that the person they thought they understood no longer exists. And that realization spreads like poison. Because humans fear change, especially when the change cannot be controlled, especially when the change comes from pain, especially when the change creates power. Now they're watching, constantly watching, every move, every word, every silence, trying to figure out what's happening, trying to decode you, trying to predict your next step, trying to rebuild the illusion that they understand you, but they don't. They can't, because the version of you they're studying is already outdated. That's another secret. The strongest people are always evolving faster than they're being observed. By the time the crowd figures out who you are, you've already become someone else. By the time the enemy identifies your weakness, it's gone. By the time the doubters understand your strategy, the game is over. That's why unpredictability is power, not random chaos. Strategic unpredictability, the ability to become whatever the moment requires. An angel when compassion is needed, a demon when boundaries are crossed, a saint when wisdom is required, a psychopath when survival demands it. Not because you're divided, because you're complete. And complete people frighten incomplete people. They don't know where to place you. They don't know how to label you. They don't know which version of you they'll meet. The forgiving one, the ruthless one, the patient one, the unstoppable one, the silent one, the devastating one. The answer is all of them. Because every version exists, and every version serves a purpose. That's what evolution through pain creates. not perfection. Range, depth, complexity. The ability to navigate darkness without becoming it. The ability to touch fire without burning alive. The ability to stare into chaos and remain composed. And now the whole world is beginning to notice. The signal is spreading. The illusion is cracking. The masks are slipping. The lies are sweating. The shadows are moving. And somewhere deep inside, the people who thought they had you figured out. A terrible realization is growing. The person they laughed at is gone. The person they underestimated is gone. The person they dismissed is gone. What's standing here now is something entirely different. Something forged in silence. Something built from scars. Something sharpened by betrayal. Something strengthened by isolation. Something that learned how to turn suffering into fuel. And the most terrifying part, you're just getting started. Just getting started. That's the sentence that keeps them awake. Not because they know what you're going to do, because they don't. And uncertainty is the birthplace of fear. Humans can survive bad news. Humans can survive painful truths. Humans can survive disasters. What destroys them is anticipation, the waiting, the wondering, the endless mental movie playing behind their eyes. What happens next? What are they planning? What have they become? What if we were wrong about them? And that final question, that is the one that poisons everything. Because once people begin questioning their assumptions, the entire structure starts shaking. The labels they gave you, the stories they told about you, the judgments they made, the limitations they projected onto you. All of it begins to collapse. And when a person's perception collapses, reality follows. You see, they never hated who you were. Not really. They hated who you might become. They hated the possibility, the potential, the future version hiding inside the present one. People always sense it before they understand it. That's why some individuals receive resistance before they've accomplished anything. The crowd isn't reacting to what they are. The crowd is reacting to what they could become. And you carried something dangerous, potential, raw, terrifying, untamed potential. The kind that refuses to die. The kind that survives humiliation. The kind that survives failure. The kind that survives abandonment. The kind that survives exposure, especially exposure. Because exposure only destroys masks. It never destroys truth. Read that again inside your soul. Exposure destroys masks. It never destroys truth. If something is real, exposure makes it stronger. If something is fake, exposure makes it collapse. That's why some people panic when the spotlight appears, and others smile, because the spotlight is not the threat. The spotlight is the test. A fire, a judgment, a revelation. And what happened? The whole internet saw it. The whole world watched. The entire digital battlefield witnessed the moment. Not the destruction, the unveiling of character, the unveiling of resilience, the unveiling of transformation, the unveiling of a person who stopped begging reality to be fair. Because fairness is a fantasy. The universe isn't fair. The universe is honest, brutally honest. It doesn't reward wishes. It rewards adaptation. It doesn't reward complaints. It rewards evolution. It doesn't reward entitlement. It rewards endurance. And endurance became your language. You learned how to keep walking when motivation died. You learned how to keep building when nobody believed. You learned how to keep climbing when the mountain laughed in your face. You learned how to keep breathing while entire chapters of your life burned to the ground. Most people only love success. You learned to love the forge. The furnace, the pressure, the transformation. Because eventually you realized something that changes everything. The pain was never your enemy. The pain was your architect. Every scar was construction. Every betrayal was construction. Every loss was construction. Every humiliation was construction. The entire time you thought life was destroying you. It was redesigning you, cutting away weakness, burning away illusions, removing dependencies, removing distractions, removing false identities, until all that remained was something real, something undeniable, something dangerous. And dangerous doesn't mean violent. Dangerous means impossible to manipulate. Dangerous means impossible to intimidate. Dangerous means impossible to control. Dangerous means your happiness no longer depends on permission from people who never deserved authority over your soul. That is freedom. Real freedom. Not the freedom they sell. Not the freedom printed on advertisements. Not the freedom packaged inside motivational slogans. Real freedom is waking up and realizing nobody can threaten you with what you've already survived. Think about that. Nobody can threaten you with loneliness when loneliness trained you. Nobody can threaten you with rejection when rejection strengthened you. Nobody can threaten you with failure when failure educated you. Nobody can threaten you with darkness when darkness introduced you to yourself. That's why you're smiling now. Not because life became easy, because you became difficult to break. Massive difference. The weak pray for lighter storms. The evolved become stronger ships. And every storm that was supposed to sink you became another chapter in your legend. Every enemy became an instructor. Every obstacle became a staircase. Every setback became momentum disguised as suffering. The joke is almost cruel. The very people who tried to stop you accidentally contributed to your evolution. Every insult, every betrayal, every doubt, every attack, every dismissal, every attempt to bury you. They were all unknowingly helping forge the version standing here now. The version the world is finally beginning to notice. The version they cannot categorize. The version they cannot predict. The version they cannot control. And that's why the atmosphere feels different. Because deep down, people know when a transformation is complete. Animals sense storms. Humans sense power. And power leaves a scent. A frequency, a presence, a shift in gravity. The room changes when certain people enter it. Not because they're loud, because they're real. Reality has weight. Authenticity has weight. And you've accumulated so much weight through suffering that your presence bends the emotional atmosphere around you. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. Especially if they can't explain it. That's why some become inspired. That's why some become uncomfortable. That's why some become obsessed. That's why some become hostile. Because authenticity acts like a mirror, and mirrors are terrifying. Mirrors don't lie. Mirrors expose. Mirrors reveal. Mirrors force people to confront themselves.